Robert Works Fuller is a physicist, educational reformer, citizen diplomat, advisor to presidents, futurist, and author. He is now an internationally recognized authority on dignity and Rankism. Bob grew up in New Jersey, where his dad, Calvin Fuller, co-invented the solar cell at Bell Labs. His mom said that her son was always in a hurry. True to form, Bob left home at 15 to attend Oberlin College, and after only 3 years at Oberlin, he enrolled as a graduate student in physics at Princeton University. Still just in his teens, Bob hit a wall academically. He went to Paris for a year to grow up. It worked. Bob then returned to Princeton, where he studied with theoretical physicist John Wheeler. He received his PhD in physics in 1961. In addition to John Wheeler, Bob's mentors included Nobel laureate Isidore Rabi, who discovered nuclear magnetic resonance; Judd Fermi, mathematician and son of physicist Enrico Fermi, who built the first nuclear reactor; and Peter Putnam. Peter and Bob published a paper on Putnam's Darwinian model of brain function. Bob taught at Columbia University, New York, as well as at Barnard and Wesleyan. He co-authored the book Mathematics of Classical and Quantum Physics. It's still in print and used today. But in 1967, Bob's attention was drawn away from math and physics and toward the civil rights movement. He developed a course for inner-city high school dropouts in Seattle to show them that they could indeed learn and be successful students.
The basic idea of the course was to derive the curriculum from student interests, to take up in any given week just what interests the students that week, to take up in any given hour or even minute what interested the students in that hour or minute, and to continually rederive the curriculum from student interests.
That project led to a new career in educational reform as the Dean of Faculty at Trinity College. While Dean, Bob advised Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in India on her Institutes of Technology. And he also worked with Alaskan Inuits in the Bering Straits. And then in 1970, at age 33, Bob became president of Oberlin College, making him the youngest college president in the nation. It was a turbulent time in America, and Bob's educational reforms made national news. He tripled the enrollment of minority students and introduced co-ed dormitories. Bob also hired the first African-American head coaches at a predominantly white university, including Tommy Smith, the Olympic gold medal sprinter.
Isn't your act in allowing the students to select a black head coach an evidence of such permissiveness?
First of all, the students didn't select the coach. They participated in the selection with many others, and the final appointment was made by the college, as with all other appointments. I think Mr. Nixon's concern confuses permissiveness with giving students permission to exercise greater responsibility. And we're training students here to be responsible citizens. How can they become responsible citizens if they don't exercise responsibility in the course of their education?
At Oberlin, Bob supported the students' anti-war demonstrations and gay liberation movement. And while president, he traveled to Vietnam to get a first-hand view of the conflict. Under his leadership, Oberlin College reformed virtually every aspect of its operations. But by 1974, Bob was burned out. He resigned on Groundhog Day. Visiting India in 1971, Bob had witnessed the famine in Calcutta. So after Oberlin, he decided to mount a campaign to address world hunger. He partnered with singer John Denver, and in 1977, the two met with President Carter and Vice President Mondale at the White House. That meeting in the Oval Office led to the creation of the Presidential Commission on World Hunger. For the next decade, it was a nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union that consumed Bob's energy. Knowing how the bomb worked, he became active as a writer, citizen diplomat, and public speaker about arms control. Bob made many trips to the USSR, riding the Trans-Siberian Railway with his family and working on video space bridges that brought together American and Soviet scientists and politicians. With the goal of building citizen-to-citizen understanding, Bob visited more than 60 countries and served as board chair of the nonprofit corporation Internews, which promotes free and independent media. In 1992, Bob worked in Somalia to help bring images of the devastating famine there to the attention of the United Nations. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Bob reflected on his life. He had observed a lot of man-made suffering, the degradation of poverty, shaming in schools and harassment in the workplace, corporate fraud and abuse, and the horrors of slavery, famine, and war. It became clear to Bob that reducing man's inhumanity to man would require a strategy that deals with how somebodies degrade and exploit nobodies. He coined the term Rankism to draw attention to abuses of the power inherent in rank.
We don't have any way that's effective to put people who abuse rank on notice that we won't put up with it.
Bob wrote articles and books on Rankism and gave hundreds of talks about its antidote, dignity for all. Radio, television, book tours, everywhere. Bob's books have been translated and published in China, India, Korea, and Bangladesh. He is now writing about the threat and promise of artificial intelligence.
Well, there is something about Rankism that feels like human nature. I admit that. But you know, sexism sure felt like human nature to me when I was 15, and it sure doesn't anymore. We can change on these things that we think are human nature, that are engraved in our genes. It turns out they're not, and the reason is because we're just barely smart enough as animals to reprogram ourselves. This may be how we differ from other animals. And it's an awful lucky thing that there arose on the planet one animal smart enough to reprogram itself. And that's just what we have to do in the next 30 years in this country and the world if we're going to have a peaceful and prosperous 21st century.